All right, well, I think we're going to get started here. Thank you all for joining us on a Friday morning, and we are very excited to be here for the much anticipated webinar that we've been promising for the Regional K-16 Education Collaboratives Grant Program. And we have a decent agenda today to go over a number of things related to the program and the upcoming application. But before we get started, we did want to take a moment to get a sense for who is joining us today. So we do still have some participants joining us. So as we get going here, we're going to be putting up a poll, and we're going to be covering some housekeeping things while you're responding to this poll as well. We wanted to get a sense for where everybody is coming from. So we're going to be putting up this poll to see where everybody's at, and we'll share the results here in just a minute. And for those of you just joining us, thank you and good morning. I do want to share some housekeeping tips for our meeting today. We will be using the Q&A feature in the Zoom platform. So if you do have questions that you would like us to address, please feel free to add it to the Q&A. We also will be recording this webinar, so if you have colleagues that were not able to attend today, they are more than welcome to review this at a later date. We'll be posting it up on the website. And just giving folks a chance here. If you've just joined us in the Zoom room here, we have a poll that's up here to determine where everybody is from. So if you could please take a moment to answer that question. And then we will get started here. I'm going to give people just a second here to keep responding to our poll. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. We're very excited to have you here and to be talking about this exciting grant opportunity. Looks like we've still got some responses coming in. All right, looks like we're almost there. Okay, and I think just got another response there. All right, a couple more. Great. So if you're just joining us and you want to take a chance to respond to the poll, we're just trying to get a sense for who's in the room today. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get ready to close the poll here, and then we can officially kick this off. All right. So do we have that up there? Can we see the poll results? Excellent. Thank you all for your responses. All righty there. Great, we actually have a pretty good mix kind of across the state here. Excellent. All right, well, let's get started then. Again, this is the Regional K-16 Education Collaboratives Grant Program webinar. I am Barbara Kampminer. I'm with the Office of Public School Construction, and I will be kicking it off today. And to get an idea of what to expect today, we are going to do a brief introduction to the program and give you a high-level view of what this program is all about. And then we're going to get into the weeds of what is actually expected of grantees if you do decide to participate in the program. We will share some additional information about the application process so far. And then we will talk about timelines and when applications need to be submitted. And we would like to leave a decent amount of time today for questions and answers. And I do want to preface this by saying that this is our stakeholder meeting, so we really would like your feedback. So we have some general outlines for the program, but for the details, we want to hear your suggestions as well. So please feel free to ask questions or to offer suggestions about the format that we have so far. And then we will wrap up with next steps on the program so that we can let you know kind of where we're going from there. And then for those of you that just joined, I do want to just repeat a couple of housekeeping things. We're using the Q&A feature so that we can go ahead and capture those questions and answers. If we do not get to all of the questions and answers, we do plan to post an FAQ document or tool on the website. So this is not your last opportunity to weigh in or ask questions. We'll have opportunities in the future. And right now we have an opportunity to post that on the OPSC website, but the program will have a specific website beginning very soon as well. And with that, I am actually going to turn it over to Ben Cheetah with the governor's office, and he is going to be giving us a big picture view of what this program means. So Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Barbara. And thank you to everybody here. I think the big thing I want to do here is try to answer the question of what was the thinking or the rationale behind these collaboratives. So there's really sort of two core reasons. The first is that we have this once in a lifetime opportunity to transform our education and workforce systems. And the second is that that's going to take a lot of coordination and work to be successful, and that work should be funded and compensated. So I'm going to double click a little bit on each of those two big reasons. So the first, our once in a lifetime opportunity. So right now, as you all are experiencing, our education and other systems are still, have been and are still in many ways focused on just managing the pandemic and maneuvering through it. But as we emerge out of that focus, we're going to be transforming and reimagining many of our systems. So we're all on the ground floor in a really, really meaningful way. It's really an opportunity, I think, for all of us to do, or many of us to do what brought us to this work in the first place, which is to make these big positive impacts for our people and for our communities. So this chart that you're seeing in front of you right now is just really a sample of some of the major investments and policies that are being implemented over the next several years. They're kind of sequenced, or they kind of fall into two buckets. The sort of step one is let's do everything we can to align around the lived reality of our students moving through these systems. So for example, that is speaking to universal school nutrition, universal after school and summer programming, universal TK, our youth behavioral health initiative, and meeting the mental health and behavioral health needs of our students. So that's sort of step one, is let's make sure our systems are actually meeting the needs of our students. And then step two is really about kind of pointing all of our people towards our future and our future needs, especially in education, climate, health, and technology. And so that's a lot of what this work is about. That second category includes things like, the compacts that you're seeing here on the very right-hand side include commitments by the CSU and UC to increase graduates entering into health, climate, and education workforces by 25%. And then on the K-12 side, the governor's proposing K-12 pathways and academies and promoting dual enrollment. So, like I mentioned, the sort of second step is to make sure that our students are on a pathway towards a career in which they could provide for their families, serve their communities, and also ultimately confront many of the biggest challenges that we're facing as a state and as a globe, really, in many cases. So that's sort of the big picture vision. That's the once in a lifetime opportunity that's ahead of us. The second core reason for why we wanted to have these collaboratives was that we know that sort of transformational change doesn't happen by accident. There's a need for deep and intentional coordination. So oftentimes that coordination does occur. It occurs organically among many of you all. But it really only happens because you all are good and mission-driven professionals. So it's the after-hours outreach, it's the weekend work that goes uncompensated. It is trying to make sure that all the cats are herded. It is that work that oftentimes is not funded. It's not really planned out. No, there's no really intentionality behind it. And so we wanted to solve for that with these collaboratives. And so these collaboratives are really about doing better than that, doing just that. It's about creating these tables and the right teams at the regional and local level who could help make sure that the coordination is occurring, who could help make sure that we're all set up for success and that we're actually able to deliver for our students and families when it comes to these big transformational investments and policies that we're hoping to advance over the next several years. So that's sort of the big picture vision and where collaboratives fit in. They're a really critical component. In my mind, they're kind of sort of people infrastructure of how a lot of this work is going to get done. And so that's why I'm so glad to see such high participation here and such a representation across the state in terms of geography, because really this is going to be the sort of engine of a lot of the change that we're trying to drive here. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Barbara.
Thank you. So before we get started into the technical details here, I did want to take a step back and look at the program and introduce it a little bit from a where it's housed perspective and who you'll be working with when applying to this program. So I did want to introduce the Office of Public School Construction because we know that some of you may have ended up at this webinar as a result of an email from us, but we actually have a lot of different avenues that people have taken to get to this webinar today. But the Office of Public School Construction is the entity that is going to be overseeing this program from the state level. And I've already let you know that I'm with the Office of Public School Construction. I'm the Deputy Executive Officer, but I did also want to introduce that on this webinar today, we also have Lisa Silverman, our Executive Officer, and we have Michael Watanabe, our Chief of Program and Administrative Services, and we are your three main contacts for the program right now within the Office of Public School Construction. And some of you may be asking, why is this housed with the Office of Public School Construction? Is this about facilities? Are we building additional schools? Not really. But the program was placed under the Department of General Services. And for some of you, you know that the Department of General Services wears many hats in state government. And we are one of the offices under that umbrella. Now, what we bring to the table is that we have been doing a facilities grant program, the school facility program, for decades. So we have an extensive history with a grant program, including front-end administration all the way through to implementing grant agreements and closeout audits, so the accounting functions. So we can bring a lot of experience there with grant administration in general. And so that's what we are seeing as our OPSC role. Now, we have a lot of experience with K-12 districts, but we don't have as much experience with higher ed and workforce partners. So the legislation for this program also allowed for the hiring of a third-party administrator to assist with the program grant implementation. And we are very excited to partner with the Foundation for California Community Colleges, or as we'll refer to them here, Foundation CCC. And Foundation CCC has been selected as a third-party administrator, and we're very excited to be partnering with them. And we did want to share that they bring a lot to the table for this program. Their combined experience and policy work is across all segments, and it runs the continuum from the K-12 system into the community colleges, the CSUs, UCs, all the way through the workforce. So experience at all levels that this program is going to touch. There is experience here with grant making programs, implementing and efficiently distributing grant making programs as well, including streamlined application processes. The Foundation CCC has been around for a long period of time. They've been an auxiliary to the Chancellor's Office for 20 plus years, so a strong foundation there. And in addition, they bring some experience working with regional collaboratives in different formats. So we think this is going to be an excellent choice for the program. We are very excited to have them on board. And with that, I am actually going to turn it over to Foundation CCC as we get into the details of the program. And we will be starting off with Beth Kay, who is the Director of Professional Learning with Foundation CCC.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Beth Kay. I am the Director of Professional Learning in the Foundation for California Community Colleges. I'll be going through about the next 9 or so slides. I actually manage this project with a couple of colleagues. You'll hear from one of those a little bit later in the presentation today. My background is mostly in K-12, but for the last 8 years, I've been with the foundation and done some workforce development work, regional collaborative work, and technical implementation work. So let's start off with the basic overview of this program. The purpose, Ben talked a lot about the very big picture and where this fits in, but we want to be very clear that this is a competitive grant program, and it is to support regional K-16 education collaboratives that are intended to create streamlined pathways from high school through post-secondary and into the workforce. And through the next 9 slides, we'll get through quite a bit of detail around this. But before I fully launch into that, I want to say a little bit about the importance of how this is connected to the Recovery with Equity report recommendations. So it's not just that we're going to be asking you as collaboratives to create or even augment the pathways from high school into the workforce, all the way into the workforce. But we're really asking you to stay focused on decreasing inequities in racial and socioeconomic ways. So the last thing I want to say at this point is, what do we really mean by a collaborative? So we recognize that there are many folks on this webinar today who have years of experience working in collaboratives. There are also a number of people here with us today who haven't participated in a collaborative before. So I'm going to say a few words about what we mean when we're talking about collaboratives. So this is not just a group of leaders who meet to discuss regional issues in education in the workforce. We intend this to be a group that comes together to gain consensus about goals that they'll attain together to improve student outcomes. These goals are those that really cannot be achieved by a single organization alone, or even by a simple partnership. We hope that this group makes agreements about how they'll work together. Data sharing is a good example of that. So in formal and informal ways, we want this group to really come to consensus about how they'll attain the goals that they agree on together. We want the groups to be discussing operational hurdles and roadblocks. We want them to be viewing data together on a regular basis. And we want the organizational leaders that commit to this to truly take shared responsibility for making changes in their own organizations to attain these goals. And the last thing I'm going to mention on this slide is that I think we're going to have someone put the link to the Recovery with Equity recommendations in the chat for you. In case you haven't seen those before, we recommend that you take a close look at them. For the next bunch of slides, I am going to be, actually, can you forward the slide? Next slide. Thank you. For the next few slides, I'm actually going to be reading them almost word for word. So to participate in this grant program, the collaboratives that apply must include at least one K-12 school district, at least one University of California campus, at least one California State University campus, and at least one California Community College campus or district. They will need to establish a steering committee with at least 25% local employers. The collaborative will need to commit to participate in the California Cradle to Career data system. We're also going to put a link in the chat to the California College Guidance Initiative, and you can check to see whether or not the partners you're considering for K-12 are already a part of CCGI. We're going to ask the collaboratives to commit to implement at least 4 of the following 7 recommendations from the Recovery with Equity report. So I'm going to read all 7 of these, but remember, it's only 4 that your collaborative has to come to consensus on and agree to work through. So first, improve faculty, staff, and administrator diversity. Cultivate inclusive, engaging, and equity-oriented learning environments. Retain students through inclusive supports. Provide high-tech, high-touch advising. Support college preparation and early credit. Subsidize internet access for eligible students. Improve college affordability. So one piece that I want to focus on is that the absolute bare minimum is what's in the first line So it has to include each of those components, at least one. But your collaboratives can include many more partners than that. So there is not a limit. One other note to make sure you're here. Other entities can include nonprofits, private institutes of higher education, as long as the public partners are there at the base. Okay. Next slide, please. So additionally, the collaboratives must commit to create occupational pathways, including accelerated degree or credential programs that incorporate work-based learning in at least 2 of the following sectors based on regional needs. So the 4 areas that you have to choose from are healthcare, education, business management, and engineering or computing. So those are the 4 choices, and you will need to choose collectively 2. Okay. Additionally to this, grant recipients will also be required to regularly track and report on progress as a part of the grant agreement. They will need to participate, so the collaboratives in full will need to participate in all evaluation activities, including the data reporting and case studies. You will also be asked to likely participate in site visits from us, the program administrator, the Foundation CCC, and potentially many technical assistance activities. Great. So this is one of the slides that lots of folks have been asking us about in questions submitted prior to this. So we're just going to go through every bullet. Grant awards. There will be up to 13 grants made, likely 1 per SURF region. And SURF stands for, if you're not aware, Community Economic Resilience Fund. So you can look that up. We can also put a link in the chat to this. The grant awards will be based on the size and scope of the applicant's plans. There will be, so in just a couple of slides, we're going to talk about a 2-phased approach that we're going to be using. And we want to make very clear up front, there is absolutely no advantage to applying in phase 1 versus phase 2. And in fact, the next few bullets make this clear. The grant awards will remain the same, the amount of the grants. So in phase 1, the phase 1 grants will be $15 to $20 million a piece. Phase 2 has 2 components, planning grants and implementation grants. The planning grants will be between $100,000 and $250,000, again, based on the size and scope of the applicant's plans. Phase 2 implementation grants will also, again, be the $15 to $20 million a piece. When the application comes out, there will be some guidance on how you can make justifications for moving toward the larger or the higher end of those awards. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this phase and the justification for why we decided to go with 2 phases. What we recognize is that there are a number of collaboratives here in the state who have been operating for quite some time, have all the required partners in place. And so we really wanted to create sort of a quick start group who is ready to go right now. So we'll have the application up and you'll be able to apply. Those groups will be able to apply by May 2nd, 2022. They will receive their funds by the start of the fiscal year. And these next 2 pieces are the sort of requirements, right? By June 30th, 2024, each of the awardees from phase 1 will have to implement 2 of the targets from the Recovery with Equity report recommendations and fully establish 1 occupational pathway. They'll also have to demonstrate progress toward the other recommendations and the second pathway. By June 30th, 2026, the collaborative will need to fully implement all 4 targets from the Recovery with Equity report recommendations and fully implement both occupational pathways. So to keep it simple in your brain, 2 recommendations by 2024 and 1 pathway, 4 recommendations by 2026 and the second pathway. Okay. Phase 2. So this is the group that we expect many of you to fall in, right? This is many regions don't have their collaboratives completely set up with all the partners in place and ready to go. So we've created this second phase, which allows for both planning grants and implementation grants. So this group will be able to apply for 1-year planning grants in this coming fall, so early fall, and then apply for the full implementation grants, same amounts, in the fall of 2023. But it is important to note that by law, the phase 2 grant recipients will also have the same deadlines as phase 1. So you will still have to implement 2 of the recommendations in the Recovery with Equity report by 2024 and your first pathway, and then your second pathway and the other 2 recommendations by 2026. Thank you. Okay, so now we need to talk a little bit about the regions. So I see that lots of folks have been asking some questions about how the regional pieces will work. And I want to reiterate that we are very interested in your thoughts and questions. And Barbara and I will be happy to talk about as many of your questions as we can in the section later in the presentation. But for now, these are the regions that we'll be using. So these are the SURF regions. It's connected to the larger work that Ben spoke about earlier. We want to make sure these efforts in this K-16 space are connected. So there will only be 1 application funded per region. So I want to make clear the collaborative can choose to serve a smaller portion of the region. You don't have to cover end to end what the limits that you see here in the map. A partner may also participate in an application from outside their region, but it's important to note that the lead agency for the application, and we'll talk a little bit more in the next few slides about expectations for the lead agency, but the lead agency must be housed within the region they're intending to serve. So one point to make here is that we recognize there's only 10 UC campuses and there are 13 regions. So obviously there do need to be ways for UCs in particular to cross boundaries and participate in more than 1 application. Ideally, your UC partner would have a programmatic presence in your region, if not a physical campus, but it is possible to form new partnerships with UCs for the purposes of this program. And I think I missed noting that there on the grant slide that the lead agency will be able to take the 5% indirect. And we'll discuss this a little bit more further on. So next slide, please. Great. So lead agencies, we've gotten a lot of questions about this. So we want to be as clear as we can. And again, looking for feedback. There can be only 1 designated lead agency per application. That lead agency should be one of the required educational partners for the collaborative. So first bullet, first set of recommendations. The lead agency can participate in another application, but can only be the lead on 1 application. This lead agency must be the fiscal agent and be able to execute contracts and process payments in an efficient manner. A different entity can also be the convener for the collaborative. So the lead agency doesn't have to be the convener, and that convener of the collaborative can provide backbone support services. One note county offices of education can represent the K-12 school districts. I want to be clear about that. Okay, and now I get to turn it over to my colleague, Jody Samuels, who's going to talk through some key dates and deadlines.
Great. Thank you, Beth. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you all for being here. And thank you for all of the questions that are coming in through the Q&A. You'll notice we have been able to answer some of them directly to those people who ask questions, and we'll try to do our best to answer as many of them as possible at the end of the session. And anything that we don't answer, we will certainly capture, and we will provide responses in a Q&A document that will be on the website. My name is Jody Samuels, and I am the Director of Strategic Support for Colleges and Scholars at Foundation CCC. And I am the co-lead on this project with Beth on behalf of Foundation CCC. So Beth has been talking a lot about the program requirements and sort of what makes up a collaborative. I'm going to touch just a little bit on some of the logistics for the application. And I also want to let you know we will be having another webinar after the application is released. And that webinar will deal much more specifically with any of those logistical or administrative questions about the application itself. But just to give you some timelines and deadlines for the application, for phase 1, the key dates you can see here on the slide are that we anticipate the grant application will be released on April 1st, which is a Friday. Applications will be due on May 2nd. And award announcements will be made on May 20th. So we know it's a pretty accelerated timeline, and we recognize that. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted to do this phased approach, so that for phase 1, it would be for collaboratives that are already existing and are pretty mature and are ready to go. And then we have our phase 2 for those collaboratives that may need a little more time to plan and get developed. So on the next slide, we have some phase 2 planning grant key dates. So this will be the next round that will be coming in the fall. We anticipate that grant application will be released on September 1st. Applications will then be due October 3rd. And we anticipate that award announcements will be made on October 28th. And these planning grants will be a year long. And so then the next phase part of phase 2 are the implementation grants, and those will be coming out in 2023. And we anticipate the grant application will be released on September 1st of 2023, with applications due October 3rd and award announcements made on October 28th. And one other thing to let you know about the application, which I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, is we will be using an online platform called Submittable that is hosted by Foundation CCC for all of the grant applications. So everything will be able to be submitted electronically. And when we release the grant application, we will of course provide information about how to use Submittable, how to use that platform. We will also be available, of course, for any technical support questions that you might have and technical assistance as you are preparing your application and using that platform if it is new to you. So those are the main applications and deadline information that we wanted to make sure you knew up front. And I will now turn things back over to Beth and Barbara to start answering some of the questions. And give us a few moments as we are collecting questions and trying to organize and categorize them. And then we will start answering some of those questions that have been coming in. Thank you.
Thank you all for the questions. There's definitely quite a few rolling in. I think some of these we may have gotten a little bit before the slides. So I think some of the slide information would have addressed that, but let's see here. So we did have oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Barbara, please.
I was just going to reiterate, we did get a couple of questions about entities that did not fit those first 4 categories of the required entities. So just to reiterate on that first bullet, the statute specifies who must be a part of the collaborative, but it doesn't necessarily limit it. So you can have more than the required minimum types of entities involved in this collaborative. So that question came up in a couple different formats. So for example, a private nonprofit institution of higher education. Yes, that is just an entity that could be included in a collaborative.
I would also add there's a connected question that says, our service area crosses several SURF regions. How does that impact our eligibility to lead and participate? We'll probably be defining a little bit more closely for the application some of these things, but if you're one of the required entities and you cross over regions, you can still participate. It's just what region are you in? And then I would say your eligibility to lead, there might be some other factors involved. And the grant money, well, I would say you're going to have to define in your application a lot more about who you're going to be serving. So you'll need to work within your collaborative to define that. And there'll be a lot more guidance in the application. I think the next one might be for you. Oh, I was going to say this question, how will a facility department fit in this collaborative? But it looks like Jody responded to that one.
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to, this is partially housed within OPSC, but that doesn't mean this is a facilities grant necessarily. The broader intention of this program is not to build facilities. That's not really the purpose, but we could see that there may be room within a grant application to explain if a facility is part of what the collaborative is proposing. But just bearing in mind that these collaboratives are intended to do a lot of other things. So you wouldn't want to use up necessarily your grant funds entirely on a facility when there's a lot of other things that need to be accomplished within the collaborative. But if there is something that you find relevant to the goals of your collaborative and it has a facilities component, that's something that you could include in your application for consideration. And then also just one other thing to keep in mind on that, and then just potentially big picture wise as well. It is a limited term program. So things like facilities sometimes have ongoing costs. So that's something to look at the beginning stages. So if you are including larger expenses that would require funding into the future, maybe be thinking about that as you're drafting your plans.
Here's a question. Oops,
oh,
sorry. I was going to say, here's a question we hadn't heard before. This comes from the far north. We border Oregon and Nevada. Can we include partners from out of state? We haven't considered that yet. So we'll kind of take that offline and get back to our Q&A area on the website. Another question about the grants that I saw come through. I want to be very clear, there will be 13 grants total between the two phases. So one per region. It's not 13 in the first phase and 13 in the second. It's 13 total for both phases.
And that relates, I think, to a couple of the other questions related to the phase 1 and phase 2. If you apply in phase 1 and you are not successful, that does not limit you from applying in phase 2 for the planning grant. So as long as we haven't covered that region, you would be eligible to apply again in phase 2. On the flip side of that, if you applied in phase 1 and received a grant, you would not then apply again in phase 2 for additional funding. So you would either pick the phase that you feel is best suited for the status of your current collaborative efforts, or if you're ready to go now in one of the fast track groups, then you would apply for phase 1, and then if it didn't work out, you'd go for phase 2. So I think that may have touched on a couple of the questions that we did see there.
Yeah, here's another one. With so many virtual K-12 schools, some regions have limited partners. Do all the partners in the collaborative need to be within the same region, or can partners be across regions? So far, there seems to be nothing that prevents people from working across regions, but we're going to ask people in the application to be very clear about who they're servicing. So just keep that in mind as you move through this. Another one sort of connected to the pathways is, can we choose all 4 industry sectors, or is that not advisable? We haven't really considered that question yet. So far, I don't think there's anything that prevents that, but we'll definitely get some more intel on that for you, and have some answers, more explicit answers in the Q&A area on the website. Looks like we may have gotten the when the RFP will be released. How might credential programs fit within this dynamic? I think we might need a little bit more about the question. There's nothing that prevents credential programs in the community colleges or in other institutes of higher education from participating. So if there's more to that question, please submit additional clarification. Here's one that's for clarification. Slide 7 states 25 plus employers, but I did say 25%. We'll make sure to go back to the legal language and check. I believe it's 25%, but I want to make sure. Okay, I see the nods. Good. So other people have been checking for me while we're talking. It is 25%, not 25 plus of your steering committee needs to be local employers.
We also had a couple of questions around the UCs just in general, and we did touch on this on the slide, but we do recognize that there is not a UC located within each of the regions, and that is okay. So a UC can be a part of a collaborative for a region in which their main physical location is not located. So we do recognize that there are situations where there is a presence by the UC in a particular region, or a partnership opportunity there, and that is something that we can consider because it doesn't line up perfectly. You all are definitely right on that, but there is a way to incorporate that into your collaborative. And then we did get a couple questions on this, but we're looking for one lead agency. So if I am the lead agency, I can be the lead for only one collaborative, but I can still participate in a different collaborative. I just can't be the lead for both of them. So this question did come up for UCs. So yes, a UC can be in 2 collaboratives, but if they were to be the lead, they could only be the lead for one of them.
Mm-hmm. This is a question about funding in phase 1 and 2. So could a phase 1 recipient possibly receive a second amount of funding in phase 2? We haven't explicitly talked about that yet. So we will definitely get an answer for that. I think the answer is likely no, but we'll discuss it and do some research and make sure to get an answer to that on the website. What is the restriction on indirect costs for institutions? A few different people have asked this question. It's a maximum rate of 5% for indirect costs for both the lead agency and all the partners. So it cannot be more than 5% for indirect cost. Barbara, do you see any others?
We did have a couple of questions related to the mature collaborative and the tool that will be available, and then a follow-up if a region is able to pull that together in time for the phase 1 applications, if that's allowed. And yes, if you're able to put together your collaborative in time to participate in phase 1, you're more than welcome to submit an application. Of course, you want to remember that these are definitely some long-term partnerships, so you'll have to kind of decide where you're at and if that's the path you want to take. But the tool will help you determine whether or not you're ready and it's a good time for you to apply for phase 1, or if really you need more time to kind of build those partnerships and figure out how this is going to work and then apply for the phase 2 collaborative. And still seeing a couple questions come in related to the awards per region, and we are still thinking 13 awards per region, but again, we want to hear everybody's feedback, but the goal is to ensure that the awards are sufficient to really put together a good process, product, outcome, grant program, essentially. So we want to make sure that these awards, while this will be a competitive program, that the dollar amounts are meaningful and allow the collaboratives to fully implement their plan and achieve the goals. So that is one of the reasons there for trying to connect it to these 13 regions. And that also helps us spread it out throughout the state so that we don't end up concentrated in only one area when there are needs statewide.
Mm-hmm. looks like, can the UC partnership be with the UC extension? Based on what we said, there doesn't seem to be anything that stands in the way of that. So I think the answer to that would be yes. Can you define backbone services in this instance? It's to be the convener of the group. Some of the more detailed activities might include setting meeting agendas, ensuring there's space for people, ensuring everyone knows what's going to be done in that meeting, following up, those types of activities. But there is more involved in being a backbone organization. And so there's some good reading on that we can make sure you find out about. I know that you shared this, but I didn't catch it. What was the amount for the phase 2 planning grant? That's going to be between $100,000 and $250,000 for, as the key dates and deadlines indicate, for about a year of time so that you can get your partners in place.
We had some questions about what data collection is going to be required, and that is essentially a more to come type answer, because we are still looking at what that is, but obviously there's going to be some information related to your outcomes, and some of that's going to be specific to what your collaborative decides to pursue as well, because that could look different depending on what you're working to achieve. Just keeping in mind that we are looking at both the quantitative and the qualitative data. So we are expecting to have some more in-depth case studies that really highlight what the collaboratives are doing and how that success can be translated to future efforts by others. But yes, we do expect some level of data collection, and then it does, and there is a commitment in the program to ensure that that data can be coordinated with the cradle to career system as well. So those are all things that are on the horizon that we will be working to get more information on as we get this grant application developed with its finer points.
Here's a question about county offices of education. It says, do you mean that a county office of education can sign up to represent the K-12 in place of a specific school district? The answer to that is yes. Let's see.
We did get a couple questions about sharing the information, so that if people are interested in knowing who else in their area wants to participate, we are definitely working towards creating an option for participants to have that access. So we do want to try to help you connect with each other. So that is something that we've got the thought process going for after this, after we complete this webinar. So we will be working to share that information.
So there's been a little bit more questioning about the data system that folks will be required to participate in. This is the Cradle to Career data system. I think we put the link in the chat earlier, but for right now, what's the baseline requirement is that your K-12 districts are a part of the California College Guidance Initiative, right? So that guidance initiative is a part of the Cradle to Career system. And the piece that you want to know about is, are the K-12 districts that you're partnering with already a part of that, or do they yet need to become a part of it? So you can look up on their website. That link was also shared earlier in the chat. Let's see what else we have here that we can get answers for.
I can actually also offer a little bit more background on the data system, Beth.
Great, thank you.
So what you noted is precisely right. I think the big sort of note right now is participation with the California College Guidance Initiative. That's a sort of big note, but just a general primer on the data system is that it is the state's effort to create, mostly at the state level, a longitudinal data system for both sort of, understanding better how our students are moving from through our K-12 systems into post-secondary and into workforce, and also to help facilitate tools like CCGI, the California College Guidance Initiative. A lot of the office was just established, the board and the office were just stood up about just a couple of months ago. So what you should have in mind is not so much like, for example, like an active student information system that you have to plug into and regularly send data to and have sort of a centralized sort of pool of data at the state level that you're sharing with. That's not the vision. It is much more about partnership with the overall goal of the data system and the work that'll move forward with it, which is mostly focused on ensuring that we have usually de-identified data sets that will enable us to understand better how students are moving from cradle to career, but also probably most importantly is the participation in this college guidance initiative, which is really central to our vision for how we help create tools that better streamline the pathway from cradle to career.
And that's
the main note there is, I think when you say data system, I think most people are thinking in their minds student information system or a centralized sort of like operational data system, and that's not what this requirement is about. It's much more about, you know, help us as a state and as a sort of a set of communities kind of figure out how we're doing in terms of getting kids from cradle to career.
So it really is the attempt to ensure that we can see how the streamlining of these pathways is working. That's the intent of having everyone participate. Thank you very much, Ben, for chiming in on that. Let's see what else. Are there
in there about match funding, if this is a program that requires a match, and this is a grant program. So there is not a specific requirement for matching funds.
Are there any requirements to ensure equitable distribution of grant funds to members of the collaborative? That's to be determined within the collaborative and not a part of what we're going to be regulating. I don't see any representation here from CSU or UC Systems. I don't know, Barbara, if you want to take that.
Yeah, I will take that one. So I saw another question that asked if the community colleges were prioritized as well. The selection of the third-party administrator and Foundation CCC, it was based on the strength of the applications that we did receive for those that were interested in being a third-party administrator. And as we talked about before, Foundation CCC's experience together with a team that is working on this project did cover all of the different ranges of educational institutions and all the way through the workforce. So the program is touching all of these institutions. So whether it is K-12, whether it's community colleges, it does need to include that CSU and that UC component and that workforce component on your steering committee. So all of those pieces are a vital part of the collaborative. So this is a partnership, collaboration, really working through the whole system. So yeah, so CSU and UC definitely still a part of this. If there was more to that question, please write in or let us know, please.
This next question is about the SURF regions and serving a whole region versus a proportion of the region. And the question is, will the proposal be competitive if we only propose a portion of the SURF region to form the educational collaborative? And there is no restriction on the size or how many partners participate within the SURF region. It's really, you'll see in the application more guidance about that. But we really want to serve as many students as we can with these grants. So I can't say that you wouldn't be competitive though. It really depends on the full breadth of what you put into the application with your partners. Let's see, looks like we already got that one.
Some of the questions are relating to specific scoring criteria, for lack of a better term there, for the grant applications. Again, more to come on that. We're still finalizing the application development. Seen a number of questions related to equity and number of students served and how we're going to be scoring. So we will have more information on that as we further develop this. Also, this is an opportunity to, if you have thoughts on that, you're more than welcome to share so that we can consider as we're finalizing the grant application, or the RFP application for the grant as well.
Yeah, I think this next question is about those data elements. How many students do you expect each of the pathways to impact? At minimum, we don't have any of those recommendations at this point. More to come. Could the self-assessment checklist be provided before the application is released? I think I'm looking to Jody right now, but I believe our assessment checklist will be on the website, which we intend to launch on Monday.
Yes, I think that the self-assessment tool should certainly be available relatively soon. We have not finalized it yet, but we do anticipate having that available before the grant application is released. So that will help folks to determine if they want to start looking at developing an application for phase 1 or if they're going to wait until phase 2. There was also a question about, we've been getting questions about allowable costs. So I just wanted to note that the grant application guidelines will certainly include detailed information about allowable costs, but because we're getting questions now, we will also include a section in the Q&A document on the website about allowable costs.
Okay, just seeing if there are any more that we haven't answered. A prior write-up on this program mentioned climate as an area of interest for this grant. Is it still, if the 4 workforce sectors are in place? What I can say is the 4 workforce areas are the ones, the pathway areas that you have to choose from. There might be some connections between climate and engineering or something like that that you could look at. Can the funds be used for, okay, so we've answered that. Related to, okay, we answered that one.
Beth, I think we also have a couple hands up as well, if we wanted to grab those.
Do you want to?
Yeah, let's see here.
Oh gosh,
I'm going to, let's see, I've got, I think, Sandra first.
okay.
Sandra, go ahead. You should be able to unmute yourself. Oh, no. Okay, let me move on to Al then. All right, you should be able to unmute yourself. Al Mijares.
Is Al still here?
Not sure. Okay, let me try Marie and we'll see if it's on my end. Okay, Marie, you should be able to unmute.
Unmute.
Michael, can you double check?
Okay.
Me on the, oh, there we go.
There you go. It
Thank you.
took a bit. Sure, it took a bit for it to process through. This is Marie Caldwell from the far north. I do have a question. It sounds like while you initially are set on the 13 grants for the region, it also sounds like you might contemplate maybe a split on that. The reason I ask is in the far north, It is a huge region comparatively, even though we serve a fewer number of students. Geographically, it is vast compared to the other regions.
So your question is, might there be more than one award per region?
Correct. Are you at all contemplating more than one award per region?
I'm looking to my colleagues, but right now, no. And again, as we said from the beginning, we're happy to hear feedback on that. Please submit, more detail about why that might be important to your region. We're happy to take that into account, but right now it's 13 awards, one per SURF region.
Al, did you want to try again? See if you can unmute. Okay, or Lori Arnold?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so want to make sure that we have a solid understanding of the phase 2, the planning and the implementation. If you're awarding 13 planning grants and there's one per no?
No.
Okay, so what I wanted to understand is the alignment of the planning and the implementation. So will that, it sounds like there's a separate application for the implementation. So a person could be, a consortium could be awarded a planning, but then not the implementation. Could other agencies or other collaboratives then apply for phase 2 implementation if they haven't been awarded a planning? Could you speak a little bit to how those two line up?
We haven't gone through this particular issue in a detailed way. So we'll probably convene afterwards and talk a little bit more about it. If you have some preferences, please let us know. But right now, the way we've envisioned this is that phase 1, as many applicants as they wish to apply can apply. We will award mature collaboratives that are ready to start immediately. And then those collaboratives in those regions won't be awarded additional grants. So those regions will be taken care of at that point. I hope I'm making myself clear. And then in the phase 2, as many groups as they wish to apply for the planning grants can do so. And then I think we need to think about whether or not a group can apply for an implementation grant that has not applied for a planning grant. We haven't discussed that in particular, so we'll definitely get back to you on that. I'm looking to my colleagues to make sure that wasn't discussed in some meeting that I maybe wasn't in, but I'm fairly sure that's where we are. Did I answer your question, Lori, or was there something more specific?
I think it'll unfold. I know sometimes when an applicant applies and receives a planning grant, often it is kind of that shoe-in that they are going to be awarded the implementation. So I'm trying to understand how competitive that planning grant needs to be, if that's going to mean that the funding is going to come through for implementation. And if you're awarding only one implementation for each region that was not funded through phase 1, then that was not awarded, and then that is not selected for the implementation phase, how many applications we might have in a region. So, if that makes sense.
It does. There's no guarantee of receiving an implementation grant in phase 2 simply by being awarded the planning grant in phase 2. So just to make that point clear.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other hands up, Barbara, that we want to try to?
Yes, I think we had Andrea next. Let me click some buttons here.
Yeah, hi, this is Andrea. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to seek a little more clarification on the CCGI. Our district went through a very deep discernment process around CCGI. We've been a long time user of Naviance as a parallel data system. And for many, many equity aligned reasons, we're a high poverty, high BIPOC district. We chose to stay with Naviance. So are we able to work with Naviance to see if they can align to the Cradle to Career data system as a second vendor rather than have to go with CCGI, knowing that they're, in many data systems that are emerging across the nation, multiple vendors doing similar work. So we wanted to stay true to our equity focused decision, and just wondering your thoughts on that, and how can we influence the process so we don't have to suddenly shift all our students and protocols to a new system.
I'm wondering if Ben has any thoughts about that. We haven't considered that, so we can't answer that question today. But we will definitely reconvene and try to come up with a definitive answer for you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I do also want to go back to this question of, applying different applicants from the same region. I'm going to go back to the beginning and the purpose of this grant program. It's really to get all the partners that need to be there at the same table working on these issues together. So it really is an advantage to try to work with other people in your region who you think are also applying. So we'd really like to see more collaboration and less competition within the region. That's what we're really looking for. I mean, they are substantial grants. So, $15 to $20 million is a lot of money. And we're hoping that helps bring partners to the table. I see another hand up, I think. Maybe not.
Let's
Nope.
see. I thought I saw one too, but it seems to have gone down just recently.
Okay.
Andrea, did you have another question? I think your hand might still be up. Yeah.
Sorry, no, I'll put my hand down. Thank you for asking.
No worries. Oh, Beth.
Hi, I'm actually Lisa. Beth and I are both on this call, but I'm showing up as Beth. I don't want to be an imposter here. I'm wondering if you could describe to us a little bit about the application process and what is required. The turnaround time of May 2nd for phase 1 seems right around the corner with all that we're already dealing with, particularly coming out of hopefully this COVID phase that we're all in. So could you tell us a little bit about the application content? What's going to be required?
We're in the process of developing that right now. The application, the scoring criteria, and there isn't much to say at this point. We haven't finalized it or made agreements about that yet, so we can't really talk too much about it unless you want to say anything, Barbara.
Just that was part of the thought process behind the 2 phases, because there is going to be some discussions that need to happen in the regional level in order to kind of get everybody on board and get everything in place. So we do recognize that there are probably those that may already be doing a version of this work or have some of the pieces in place that will be ready to address the application and provide the details on what you're needing to move forward. But if the timelines aren't quite there, then phase 2 is definitely an option too.
So just out of curiosity, is there a date in mind for when the RFP will be available?
Yes.
And that is?
I am looking back and I'm looking.
I can jump in here. Sorry. For phase one, we anticipate releasing the grant application on April 1st. And then it will be due on May 2nd. And yes, we do recognize it is a very compressed timeline. One of the reasons that we are collecting so many questions is that we're hoping that by answering the questions and by posting the Q&A on the website and by updating it regularly, that will help folks to start doing some planning. And then when we release the grant application, we will of course have full guidelines about what is going to be in there. And in general, I would say it's probably what you might anticipate, that there will obviously be a number of questions about the collaborative partners, how the collaborative is working together, how you have determined the needs of your region, how you will meet the goals that are required under this program, how you've determined what those needs are and which are the priority goals. So those are the types of questions that certainly will be part of the application. There may be others as well. And as Beth said, we are starting to develop that now. We will also ensure that in the grant application guidelines that it is very clear about what the review criteria are, including any rubrics, so that you can plan for that as well and understand how the applications will be evaluated. And one of the reasons we are using an online platform is we are also hoping that will help to streamline and make the application process more efficient so that applicants will not need to worry about printing copies or hand delivering copies or sending things via FedEx, but that you are able to use an electronic platform instead for all of the application questions as well as any required attachments or additional information.
A hand up for Lena. Whoops, name just moved. Lena Mendez, I think you should be able to talk.
Hi, everyone. This is Lena Mendez from UC Davis. As Mary mentioned earlier, the northern part of the state is so big, and we are the farthest north UC, and obviously there's multiple surf areas for this region and above. And earlier I had asked if it was possible for those of us who answered the poll, if you could share with us like the emails of all of us who answered for those particular regions so that we can be in communication since we're all participating in this webinar. Is that a possibility?
Yes, I think we were trying to put together something so that everyone can communicate. I think we envisioned asking first for anyone that did want to be excluded from that maybe wasn't interested in sharing that, or potentially having folks opt in to a list. So we do want to make that available. So we also will be, we typically do an after event survey type opportunity. So we will be communicating again with this group that has signed up here so that we can get that information. So, but we didn't want to just blanketly share emails unless we had permission, just in case there was anyone that wasn't open to that. So, but yeah, we are planning on putting that together in the next few days. So I would say by early next week, we will have a solution for that, for those that do want this as a connection opportunity, because that was one of our hopes, that this webinar would bring people together that maybe didn't know that their neighbor was interested in this opportunity. And as Beth mentioned earlier, there's definitely a lot of value to collaborating within your region so that we can get the strongest collaboratives possible. So yeah, we will get that out to you guys very soon.
Thank you.
We have a few more hands up. Serena Chapman.
Thank you so much. This is actually Nazi Zagrapur using a shared link that belongs to Serena. This was extremely helpful, a lot of great information. One nuanced question regarding the lead. We are in Southern California. We're part of a long-standing collaborative that has been generating some really wonderful outcomes for students. The lead has been a nonprofit university, a graduate university. I noticed there was at one point a statement that the lead has to be one of the, quote, required institutions. So what are the implications of that for an existing, longstanding collaborative that's been led by definitely a university in the region and in our pipeline, but that is a nonprofit. We do have multiple community colleges, Cal State, UC, and of course, PK-12 district at the table as well.
So the definition of the lead agency for us is the agency that will make the application to us, and the agency that will process the funds both from the state and out to the partners. Beyond that, we haven't defined.
Okay.
So there are likely other activities that your organization provides for the collaborative that might be considered sort of backbone activities that would still be permitted.
Sure.
But your organization would not be the applicant or the recipient of the dollars.
Because we are a nonprofit and not a community college or a public university. Is that I think? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we would have to select one of the public agencies in our collaborative to be the applicant.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
And I think we did have a question earlier that was looking at the use of the terminology of the convener of the collaborative. So we have that on slide 14, kind of this concept that there would be a different lead agency than maybe somebody that is, well, the term we used was convener. So somebody that is doing some of those tasks. So that might be a good slide to take a look at as well. So we did kind of anticipate that this might have some shared responsibility across the different entities.
Thank you.
There's also an additional question. Can you elaborate on expectations for employer participation and roles in the collaborative? We don't have any guidance on that at this point. The minimum expectation is that 25% of your steering committee will be local employers. Other than that, no directives at this time.
I believe I saw another hand. I apologize if I mispronounced this. Elevi?
Yes, if you mispronounce it, you need to give me the money then.
I've got
Yes.
Campine as the last name, so I understand.
Hey, we have to laugh from time to time. I had added my question in the chat, but you didn't see it. Elavi from Cal Poly Humboldt. The 13 grants, are they combined for phase 1 and phase 2, or does each phase have, will you be awarding 13 grants per phase, or are they for both phases 1 and 2?
It is 13 grants total.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Do we have any more hands, Barbara? I'm still looking
through. I think we've gotten to all the hands, although I do see, Beth, I don't know if you had an additional question. I can go back. Oh, no, hand is down. Okay. Lena, was there an additional question? Oh, okay. And then let me try Al one more time, just in case we have him back. Al Mijares. No, okay. I think that's all the hands. If we wanted to take a peek back in the chat here, I know we're getting close to our time. These are all great questions. Thank you guys so much for sharing all this.
So one of the questions that does get to a little bit of nuance is, can a community college consortium represent the community college district and act as the lead entity? We haven't discussed that one. Right now, my response would be no, because it's not a single one of those entities that are required. But we can certainly discuss that and make sure to get a response. for collaboratives with multiple, okay.
Jody, while we're catching up on questions, did you want to repeat the program deadlines for us? I saw that question pop up a couple times on the overall timelines of the program.
Sure, absolutely. Yes. So in terms of the overall program timelines for phase 1, the key dates are that we anticipate the grant application will be released on Friday, April 1st, and then applications will be due on May 2nd, and award announcements will be made on May 20th. And then for phase 2 planning grants, we expect that the grant application will be released on September 1st, and applications will be due October 3rd. This is all this year still, and award announcements will be made on October 28th, as the slide says here. And on the next slide, we do have the phase 2 implementation grant key dates. These will all be happening in 2023. So we expect the grant application to be released on September 1st, 2023, with applications due on October 3rd and award announcements made on October 28th.
Thank you. And then I did see one up here that I thought might be worth repeating. Question was whether the intent was that this is an initiative where the focus should be statewide or regional. I know we've got the answer there in the chat, but yes, the focus on this is to be regional. So we're looking at smaller areas of the state because it could be very different depending on what's happening in your part of California. So that was the goal of this program, was to support that continuum from the early ed stages all the way up to the workforce for that particular region.
Here's another one about CCGI. For the collaboratives with multiple K-12 districts, do all the K-12 partnering districts have to be engaged with CCGI, or is it at least just one? It is the expectation that all will be participating in CCGI. When will the PowerPoint provided today be posted? When our website goes up on Monday, but I think it will be on the OPSC website, I think today.
It is already.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
Yes, I will drop that link in the chat again here.
I'm also doing a time check here just to make, okay, so we're just about at 12. I think we should probably say, if you had a question or a suggestion for us and we weren't able to get to you, we apologize. We'll make sure we try to respond to all these questions and suggestions in our Q&A FAQ section on the website. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jody to close out our webinar today.
Great. Thank you, Beth. And thank you all for all of these questions. We definitely understand this is a new program and there are a lot of details still to be fully determined and a lot of nuances. So it's really helpful to have all of your feedback. And I think one of the reasons we can't answer all the questions about the grant application is because we wanted to get your feedback. That's really the intent of the stakeholder webinar, because we want to be sure when we do release the grant application and the guidelines that it is very clear and that all of you have clear guidance about how to form the collaboratives, what the goals of the overall project are. So this is very, very helpful, and we will certainly be posting more information on our website. And speaking of which, we will be launching a new standalone website on Monday, February 28th, and you can see the URL here on the slide, www.k16collaborative.org. Please note that the initial launch is going to have some very basic information, and we will be adding to it on a regular basis as we have more information available for you. So if you don't see something right away, please be patient. We are building it out and we will be adding those resources. You will be able to subscribe to a listserv as well as submit questions or comments through the website. So there will be a contact us button on the website, which will allow you to submit questions or comments. And there will also be a button to allow you to sign up for more information and to be added to our listserv, so that as we have additional information, we will be sending that out through our listserv. You can also submit questions directly to our email, which is K16collaborative@foundationccc.org. We will be responding to those questions. If we're getting a lot of similar questions, we probably will include them in an updated Q&A on the website. So keep that in mind as well, but we are happy to also address those questions individually. And then we will be conducting an applicant webinar in early April after release of the grant application. We do not yet have that date, but obviously we will let you all know as soon as we have set that date. And that webinar really will focus more specifically on the mechanics of the grant application, as well as any questions about the grant application guidelines and the review and scoring criteria, which will also be included in the grant application guidelines. So stay tuned for that. We will post that information as soon as we have it. And with that, I will turn things back over to Barbara, I think, to close us out for the day.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jody. And then just one reminder, if you did find out about this program or this webinar by virtue of the OPSC email list, please note that we will give you a heads up when the website goes live, but you will not automatically be transferred over. So please do sign up for the new listserv at the other system. So please make sure you take a chance or take advantage of that opportunity there. And then just thank you all for attending today. We are very excited to be at this stage of the program, looking forward to the applications that come forward, and definitely appreciate your feedback. So keep the questions coming, and we will be sharing more information as it becomes available. And with that, everybody have a great Friday, and we will hopefully see you all soon in April after the grant application is released. All right, and with that, we're going to go ahead and end our webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.